Hi there, I'm Jennie Queen, and I'm here today from an Aquafitness perspective and background. I am a master trainer with the Canadian Aquafitness Leaders Alliance, known as CALA. I've been working with that organization since I was 16 years old, and I'm now in my mid-40s, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of how long I've been involved in Aquafitness. And with that particular organization. When I first started teaching Aquafitness, I was 16 years old, and one of the first classes that I had the opportunity to teach was actually a prenatal Aquafitness class. So you can imagine at 16 years old, freshly certified to just teach fitness, to be thrown into a prenatal class was entertaining, to say the least. They were very generous with me, and we all learned together. So the new moms were learning about what their bodies were going through and enjoying the experience of being in a fitness class together. And I got to apply the limited knowledge that I had at that time about prenatal, pelvic floor, core, and all of those pieces into the classes that I was teaching. Fast forward any number of years with the organization, I became a trainer for them. I started developing some workshops and some trainings for the Canadian Aquafitness Leaders Alliance, and started learning a little bit more about aquafitness as a whole for different populations. But this was always a population that stuck with me because I'm also a mom. So I've been blessed with two beautiful daughters. Had two completely different pregnancies and deliveries with each of my children, which really gave me a totally different perspective again on what the human body goes through, what it's capable of, how we can work out and embrace body, mind, and spirits in what we're doing to be successful in all aspects of life, but particularly during our childbearing years. Fast forward a little bit further, start early perimenopause. I've always also suffered from very severe menstrual cycles, which I found really I struggled with for any number of years. So that for me started when I was only 10. If you could believe it, I was at a swim meet, had no idea what to expect, was a complete shock. I actually thankfully can thank a fellow swimmer for coaching me through how to make it through the rest of that swim meet. That's a whole other story. So we've all had different experiences, but I really, really suffered and struggled with each of my cycles. And as you can imagine, once I finished having my children, I was looking for other options. I was medicated fairly strongly each month, and I really didn't want to be on medication long term. So one of the options that was brought to me was hysterectomy. And I made the decision to do that, and certainly wouldn't change that decision. However, I would change the amount of information that I had going into that particular process, because certainly after having two children, a hysterectomy, having an active lifestyle, teaching fitness, having a little bit more of a desk job in the last few years with my job as a portfolio manager with the City of Ottawa, I put a little bit of extra weight on in those last few years, and certainly hormones with perimenopause, that was also playing a role. And all of a sudden, I'm teaching a workshop actually one day, and I'm doing a propulsive movement that I had done for years and years before, and I thought I needed to just dig myself a hole and disappear, because in that propulsive movement, I urinated, and I had no idea where it came from. I mean, I did. But certainly you have that moment where you're like, this is not my life. This is not what I signed up for. Very fortunate that I have a very open, wonderful relationship with my family physician, who promptly sent me to a pelvic floor physiotherapist. Yay, doctor, yay, pelvic floor physio. And that completely changed my life and my perspective on me wanting to know more information. Certainly you give a fitness person a little bit of information and we want a little bit more. Even truer when we ourselves are starting to experience some challenges or some obstacles, we want to know how to fix those. And so that's really what brings me here today to talk about what I've learned through my journey within Aquafitness, but also my own pelvic floor journey. Why Aquafitness is good for you and for many diverse populations. Let's talk about that for a minute. The first thing you need to understand are really the various properties of water that are going to be at play on your anatomy and your physiology during your hour-long fitness class. So let's talk first about the differences then that come with that between land and water. So on land, the biggest challenge that we have, particularly from a pelvic floor standpoint, is that we're working against gravity. Everything that we do, whether we're using equipment, body weight, or not, on land, we're fighting against gravity. And gravity has a huge impact on the pelvic floor. Think about all of your organs within your core that are weight on your pelvic floor. So all of those organs are literally sitting on your pelvic floor, and that, for many of us, creates some strain and perhaps is part of the problem with prolapse. When we're in the pool, we lose gravity and we introduce buoyancy. So water is a buoyant entity. So now imagine all of your organs within your body and within your core not weighing anything or very, very little. So they're actually now floating, if you will, due to buoyancy within your core. And that takes all of that pressure off your pelvic floor during the time that you're exercising. So that's one really cool benefit. There are a few other properties of water. There's 5 properties of water that we as trained certified instructors, particularly those with the Canadian Aquafitness Leaders Alliance, train, teach, and incorporate into how we're facilitating our classes, buoyancy being one of them. The other thing we want to know that is at play with your body with buoyancy is our joints actually all start to open up. So when we're not fighting gravity, our joints actually have more space and flexibility to move. So your flexibility naturally increases when you're in an aquatic environment. How does that impact the pelvic floor? Well, it's actually fairly simple. When you think about your hip and your pelvis and your pelvic floor all being interconnected, a lot of times some of the problem has to do with how tight we are in those particular areas, and perhaps our movement isn't as free as we would like it to be, or as balanced as we would like it to be. Well, by being in that aquatic environment that's very buoyant, we have that increased flexibility. So on land, with that gravity, you'd think about our joints being, fairly snug and tight, particularly those of us who weigh a little bit more than others. That can make it even more stressful on those joints. As soon as we get into the water, that actually opens up quite nicely, and we end up with the ability to move. So with that hip joint, we have much freer movement in all the directions that hip naturally wants to go. That allows the muscles and the ligaments and the tendons that are associated with that joint to start to move more functionally. So imagine immersing yourself literally in an environment that can open up for you a whole new world of movement. That's pretty fun. So when we're now moving, we're freer to move in that environment. Flexibility increases. And some other fun things happen, because now let's talk about another property of water, resistance. So typically when we're on land, we're either resisting gravity or a weight or some form of equipment. Ideally in the water, I advocate for using yourself and water as your primary training tool. You really don't need equipment in the pool to get an effective and efficient functional workout. The cool thing with being in that aquatic environment is you have resistance 360 degrees around you and 180 degrees from water surface to water surface. You don't get that functional movement anywhere else. So water's a pretty nice place to be. When you think about that resistance being all around you, that resistance also doesn't change. With whether I'm moving forward or backwards, that resistance is exactly the same. If I'm in the pool, not using any equipment, just my body, and I'm doing a bicep movement, on the way up, as I'm pushing the resistance of the water, and there are ways to manipulate how much resistance you're going to give yourself. It's entirely up to you as the exerciser. It's a concentric contraction of the bicep. Now wait for it. What's really neat in the water is when your hand is traveling back down, the tricep kicks in and it gets a concentric contraction. So in the water, you have a double concentric contraction. Nowhere else are you going to get this. Why does that matter to us when we're talking about pelvic floor? Is it really helps with muscle balance. So I don't have to be training specific muscles to get that well-rounded, balanced workout. Now, when we're talking about the hip area, that's really important because all too often we have a strong side, right or left, or we have stronger muscles. Maybe it's the hamstrings or the glutes that are tight, or maybe it's, your quads. Maybe your adductors or abductors have an imbalance. When we're working out in the water, doing any of the movements, we're naturally getting muscle balance for both muscles within a muscle pair. So that's really an effective and unique way. The other piece with having that muscle balance is you tend not to have muscle soreness to the same degree because you're not working eccentrically. But doesn't mean that the muscles aren't getting an effective workout. They're still getting a workout, but that muscle contraction change makes a big difference in the suppleness of the muscles and how effectively they're able to work. Now, in that water's always moving, so we call that turbulence. And with that turbulence, something else really cool happens, and that helps with taking away any of those toxins that start to build up in the muscles when we're working out. So that also keeps that delayed onset muscle soreness. Virtually, we don't have it in the pool when you're using the water and your body as a primary training tool. Hydrostatic pressure also plays a role. So it really is like full body hosiery when we get into the pool. So imagine if you're experiencing any of the key things that can happen with circulation when we're not moving as much because it's challenging for us to move on land. Hydrostatic pressure increases circulation everywhere we need it, and our muscles to function well need good quality circulation. The other thing that changes with hydrostatic pressure, or the benefits of hydrostatic pressure, are venous return. So your heart rate is actually lower. Now, wait for it. We're talking pelvic floor, so we don't want to lose sight of maybe there's some challenges associated with hydrostatic pressure. And there are two key challenges associated with hydrostatic pressure. Are you with me? Full body hosiery. What's that doing to the bladder? Well, for some of us, that could be a little bit tricky for a full hour. You may actually experience, especially if you're staying hydrated enough, that you need to make a quick visit to the bathroom during your Aquafitness class, and that's totally okay, because the last thing we want to be doing as people who are recovering from or working with pelvic floor issues is holding it in. So when you need to go, you're going to go. So that could be one challenge for people training in a pool due to that hydrostatic pressure. Another challenge for people because of that hydrostatic pressure, which can also be transferred if you're knowledgeable into a benefit, is the impact that hydrostatic pressure has on your diaphragm. So imagine being hugged all of the time. When we're working as pelvic floor specialists and when we're working on our own pelvic floor, a lot of emphasis and focus goes on proper breathing. And when we want to be breathing where our diaphragm and our pelvic floor are working functionally the way they're supposed to work. Well, if you're getting a hug all of the time, that can be really difficult for you to be breathing diaphragmatically to expand. Now, the positive is you're actually training it. You have resistance in that area where you wouldn't necessarily have. So it can actually increase your mind-body awareness of effective breathing from the diaphragm. But it does take some practice, and you have to remind yourself throughout the Aquafitness class to keep breathing and breathing properly. So you want to find a good instructor that's going to help you with those specific cues. So take the time to develop a connection and a relationship with the instructors that you're choosing. Ask them some questions and take your information along with you to the pool. So when you pack your bags to go to an Aquafitness class, you've got your swimsuit, you've got your towel, you've got a plastic water bottle. Don't forget to take the knowledge and experience along with you to the class and apply it each and every time you get in and splash and enjoy all of the benefits of working out in the pool.